Hi everyone, my name is Angela Hart. I'm a second-year CCD graduate student at Georgetown University. For the last year, I've been working on my thesis project, Do Political Film Adaptations Affect Voter Knowledge? As someone who has read all the screenwriting manuals and taken creative writing classes, I became intrigued with how people freely adapt and all the creative liberties that they take, and so I wanted to know how that influenced the viewer. Did it influence them? Did people know the difference between the historical facts versus the dramatized elements on film? Having watched a lot of adaptations, I'm always curious as to why someone made an edit or a certain decision or invoked creative liberties, and so this project was my way of determining how those actually influence the audience. I became interested in this particular project because a lot of films take creative liberties or dramatize events, and so they'll take a book that is this thick and condense it to this thick. What does that really imply for the audience? I wanted to take a project and see if audiences could actually learn from these adaptations, and if the information is presented, will they remember it? One of the limitations of my particular study is the fact that people would watch the film and I wouldn't be able to have a post-test 2 weeks later or a month later. My post-test had to be immediately after, so I wasn't able to follow up a month later and see if they still remembered exactly who Katherine Harris was or what political party Ron Klain was a member of. So I wanted to test more elements that I could as a master's student. Hopefully for my PhD I can test a lot of different variables later on to see if there are other implications or there are other effects. But for the time being, I focused more on the specific definitions and party affiliations. Screenwriters have the job of telling a story, not educating the audience. Their goal is to not portray the events accurately, but to portray them in a manner that's going to invoke emotion and instill a sense of suspense. While it would be nice to have films that are historically accurate, that is not always the case. I'm always fascinated by the fact that a movie is 2 hours long and they have to condense a lot of information to fit their facts in with the story. By doing this, they need to adjust and alter the content so that the viewer is able to follow a narrative, not the facts. And so what becomes problematic for me is that the viewer will not then follow up with, they won't go on Google, they won't go to the library, they're not going to elaborate on what was dramatized and why. They might take it at face value, and so that's one of my concerns. You can't watch Braveheart and know everything there is to know about William Wallace. Films leave out a lot of details or adapt them to fit the narrative. It probably seems obvious that films are not accurate, but with the growing use of the phrase inspired by true events or based on true events, people blur the lines between fact and fiction. As a researcher, I had to accept the fact that I could not account for all of the different variables, but I could study if people did learn from fictitious films. In order to test viewer knowledge gain, I utilized the film Recount as my case study. At this particular point in time, I have seen the film Recount at least 50 plus times. I've seen it quite a bit, and I know it inside and out, and I've also conducted extensive research on the 2000 election, as well as spoken with some of the real-life individuals involved with the process. So this is something that I'm very passionate about, and I've invested a lot of time in. I, however, am not most people. Having watched the film and then read Jeffrey Tobine's Too Close to Call, I can see the differences and the discrepancies. If you watch the film, you can identify what a dimple or a chat is, but if you read the book, you know what the sunshine standard is and all the other definitions associated with the recount. You only have half of the story, and you have the Democrats as the protagonists. So the film does convey information, but it's not all the information.